Thank you all for joining today. I'm Connie Calhoun, and I'm very glad to welcome you to the launch of the new wine book titled On California. For housekeeping details, I was going to ask you to please add your name to your Zoom profile by clicking on the three dots and choosing rename to type in who you are for our panelists if your name is not posted. We expect this discussion to last about 45 minutes, and we'll have a Q&A at the end. You're welcome to add questions to the chat or raise a virtual hand, which is found under reactions on your screen, or raise an actual hand for us to call on you, at which time you will need to unmute yourself. Please note we are recording this session. As you will hear today, On California is a collection of renowned wine writers' works on California wine, published by the late Stephen Spurrier's Académie du Vin Library, dedicated to publishing the finest wine writing of the past, the present, and the future. I would like to introduce your moderator for today, Hermione Ireland, Managing Director of Académie du Vin Library, coming to us from the UK. Hermione.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming today. Hello, Hugh. I can see you at the bottom. Thank you, Red. We're so excited to be doing this launch in the US and for the US. On California is our first proper title that we're launching in America. And we're very grateful for all of the help that Kati and her team are giving us. Please do have a look at some of our other books on our website if you get a chance afterwards. If the courier gods have been kind to us, and I know they haven't been kind to Karen so far this morning, copies are on their way. Some of them may have arrived with some of you already, but I really hope you enjoy the book as much as we have enjoyed making it. We're going to be joined, we've got Warren Winiarski, who we're very, very grateful for his support of this publication. He's going to say a few words in a few minutes. And then we have three wonderful, eminent contributors who I know are very well known to all of you. Karen MacNeil, who wrote the foreword, and Hugh Johnson and Elaine Chukan, who both contributed several essays each. I don't think they need further introduction from me. They're all absolute stars and gods in the firmament of wine, frankly. And we have been joined by a few of the other contributors. I'm really excited that they've joined us too. Apart from the contributors who are members of the press, we also have Gerald Asher. Aileen McCoy is dialing in from the East Coast, and Kelly White. And in the same time zone, if she's with us yet, which is unusual for her, is Patricia Gastaud, who is over for this week's Judgment of Napa event, which has been organized by Angela Durr. So I'm going to ask all of them if they would like to add any comments after the panel. And if you have questions for any of them, as well as for Karen, Elaine, and Hugh, please do ask them. So firstly, can I come to you, Warren, to tell us a bit about why you've supported and participated in On California?
Well, I think it was in the spirit of Stephen. This book has the effect of giving an example of how in an untried land, in a very, in fact, exceedingly short time, where grapes had not been part of the native culture, grapes and wine came to emerge and to be very successful and to make a contribution. And I thought this would be a model for others to help in the emergence, and not only the emergence, but the elevation of wine where they were, wherever they were. And this is in the spirit of Stephen, to whom I owe so much in my own career. And it would be by the things that are said about how that emergence took place. Stephen would, in fact, be part of that, to give an example to other places on the planet where perhaps grapes and wine, if they needed an emergence, it could take place. If they needed an elevation by raising their expectations and their sights, that could take place also. So the book does that so well. And I thought it deserved all the support it could get. And I hope it will prove so. And that Stephen, as I said somewhere else, did not have an ear for a disparaging muse. And this book, I think, will be a muse, a inspiriting muse for others. I hope so. And that's why I supported it.
Thank you, Warren. That's wonderful. Now, tomorrow would have been Stephen's 80th birthday, and this book, and we as publishers would not exist without him. We have a short note to play you from Bella. Tinker, if you could possibly play that. Bear with us. It worked perfectly on Friday.
Yeah, of course. Apologies. 1 second. Let me reshare. One second, Cody.
Zoom connects everyone around the world, which is wonderful, but technology is designed to trip you up on the night, always. Shall we, why don't we do the toast to Stephen before, and we'll play the message to Bella in a second. Warren, would you like, I know it's early in the morning and we haven't sent you all a glass of something. Many of you may have a glass of water or a cup of coffee instead, but Warren, tell us what you're drinking, and would you raise the toast to Stephen, please?
Yes, this is in the spirit of the 73 Cabernet. And so I raise that glass to Stephen and to his presence with us all here today. To Stephen.
To Stephen. Thank you. Right, we'll try it with the video.
Well, this is just to say hello to everybody in California. I'm sorry I can't join you. And even more sorry, of course, that Stephen won't be there. He would have been so proud and so pleased and so touched by all of this going on. And I'd just like to remember our many friends in California, too many to name, I think. And to say, I wish you all the very best from Dorset to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Warren. And that was Abby from Bella. So on to the panel. So these are the questions, and I'm going to come to Hugh first for this one. We wanted to get across in the book the sense of adventure and the extraordinary pioneering spirit of winemakers in California from the earliest attempts to start a wine industry. Could you tell us all about one of your favorite moments from the history of Californians wine making, please, Hugh? I think you're on mute, Hugh. You'll need to unmute yourself. Bottom left. Kati, can you unmute Hugh otherwise?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
We can.
All right, okay. Well, I'm going to record when I first went to California, which was in 1958. I think about it, that it was before things really got going in the wine business. What was, well, a favorite moment for me was discovering what was going on. Although there were very few people making wine of any interest at all. I thought when I first went to the Napa Valley, let me say, there was none of the modern civilization at all. There was only one place to eat in the entire valley, and that was the Grapevine Inn, and then they could burn a hamburger as well as anybody. It was a primitive area. So what is exciting is seeing its civilization in every sense of the word, and watching it going on over a period of 60 years or so. Has been thrilling all the way. If I have to pick out one or two moments of vivid memory, one is going to see Andrei Chelistchev at BV in the early days, and he was telling me how he was actually, there was a kind of secret society. People didn't tell each other how they were making better wine, and I was amazed to hear that the refrigeration equipment, i.e. chilling the must, was kept behind the door so that passing visitors didn't find out what was going on. That gives you some idea of what the changes have been.
Wonderful, thank you, Hugh. Karen, can I come to you next?
Yes, well, I remember Andrei myself, but the greatest womanizer of the Napa Valley there has ever been. But we'll leave that story to a different time. I would choose as perhaps the most pivotal moment in California's history, or certainly one of them, the gold rush. I was looking at a bit about the history of vineyards in California prior to the gold rush. You could buy a vineyard east of Los Angeles for 75 cents an acre in the 1830s and 1840s. And then in 1849, the entire state's history changes abruptly with the gold rush. San Francisco itself goes from a population of about 800 people to 25,000 people in 2 years. And with that stunning event, the entire industry moves north. And of course, it was to the wine industry's benefit, I suppose, that so many poor young European men did not strike it rich, had too little money to return home, and therefore returned to the two things they knew, which in many cases were farming and grape growing. You know, it's from that point really that both Sonoma and Napa begin their emergence as really great wine regions. And of course, it didn't hurt that San Francisco now was a huge market of thirsty people ready to buy all of the wines that were now going to be made. So for me, it would be the gold rush.
Wonderful, thank you. Elaine, how about you? Favorite moment or two?
Well, so I'd love to build on both Karen and Hugh's comments. That period right after Karen describes, as she's saying, it's so incredibly pivotal. And then immediately following in the 1850s, suddenly this, you know, wealth of cuttings start to enter the state finally for the first time. And French, German, and some American growers all start to bring in new varieties. And we really begin to see what the potential of California can be for the first time, which is incredible. But I thought a lot about what would be a pivotal moment for me. And to add a personal element to it, I'm the youngest. I was lucky enough to grow up the youngest of 4 generations in my family. And so I was always sorely aware that I had catching up to do. And it really informed how I came into wine as well. I've always felt that I really missed a lot of the incredible history of wine because I came into it a little bit later and relatively recently. But I'm quite overwhelmed, I have to say, to be on this panel with Karen and in this book with Elaine and Paul Draper and people that have been so incredibly welcoming of me into this industry and really quite inspired me as well. And the inspiration I got was really to do everything I could to try to learn that history, even if I wasn't witness to it. And so I spent quite a bit of time trying to understand Chardonnay in California, and have been lucky enough to spend quite a bit of time at Hensel. And so I spent, UC Davis has incredible archives, and there's so many other wonderful oral histories that have been recorded as well. And I spent quite a bit of time looking at old research done at Hensel on Chardonnay, and they really changed the course of winemaking in California. And I think, unfortunately, Brad Webb has not been credited well enough for how much innovation he brought to the state, and even influenced other parts of the world through his use of stainless steel, which when he started doing that in the late 50s really wasn't done anywhere in the world. Stainless steel was not so easy to come by as it is now. And his innovation with temperature controlled tanks did actually inform and influence even producers in France, and then were adopted at a larger scale by Mondavi, which then influenced even more people. And he, of course, was able to bring in the use of nitrogen to have a cleaner bottling environment as well, which is really quite significant. So I spent all this time reading about Brad Webb and his incredible work as an innovator and researcher, but also obviously a winemaker and enologist. And I just assumed that I would never be lucky enough to know what his wines were like. But a couple of years ago, I was able to have lunch with Paul Draper, and he asked what I had been researching. And I said, well, I've been doing a lot of Pinot tasting and trying to find as many old vintages as I can. And he said, if you don't mind waiting, I'll be just right back. I have to run home. And he came back about 15 minutes later with a bottle of 1965 Hensel Pinot Noir made by Brad Webb, and we drank it with lunch. And in the middle of lunch, he asked if I would help him tell the story of California Pinot for the other guests. And so for about half an hour, Paul Draper and I were able to go back and forth, building the story together of how California Pinot came to be and the work that Brad Webb did. And when Paul turned to me at the end and said, so what do you think of the wine? I burst out crying, because this is one of these moments, and I feel it even now with all of you, where we all come together in celebration of something that on one side is so incredibly simple. It's just wine. It's just something we drink. But in actuality, it's a representation of lifetimes of work, really incredible dedication that has built over and over and all in concert together. And we get to choose how we want to appreciate that. And I'm really grateful for this book, bringing all of us together and celebrating that history as you've asked us to do, Hermione. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Elaine. That was fantastic. And it actually brings me perfectly to my second question, which is really, obviously California has always been one of the most innovative and pioneering progressive wine regions in the world. And we have featured many of the innovations in the book. Could each of you talk about the work that's going on at the moment that most impresses you? And can I go to Karen first for that question, please? Sorry, Karen, you're on mute.
There we go. Thank you, Hermione. And Elaine, that was so beautifully said. Thank you. I think when I think about what is changing the course and what will continue to change the course of California's trajectory, of course, technology, we all know, plays a very important role, and technology is everywhere evident in so many vineyards today. But the impact of technology was brought home to me a couple of years ago when I visited UC Davis's Winery of the Future. And if anyone who is listening and who's here today has not visited this winery, it is really quite stunning. The winery uses no commercial energy. It creates its own hydrogen by creating hydrogen fuel cells. Every drop of water that is used is harvested, in a sense, from rain. It just standing in that building, I imagined what will California feel like, and what will going to a winery feel like 100 years from now? And I think it will feel like that place. It's just an extraordinary undertaking that UC Davis has been working on now for close to a decade. So that would be my response, Hermione.
Thank you. I would love to come and visit. That sounds amazing. Elaine, back to you for the same question.
Yes, thank you. I actually, I hope Warren doesn't mind, but I really want to highlight work that Warren is doing and supporting. Warren, you've made such an incredible effort with the archive at UC Davis, and several of the writers whose work you've brought into that archive are here on this call today. And but I also would really love to see more writing being done on the efforts that Warren is really elevating and supporting in terms of helping to update the Winkler-Amarine Climate Index and really bring it into the future. You know, as we know, that index has been so crucially important, and it helped us start the early days of grape growing, understanding heat summation and its role in different climate areas and varieties that could work there. But Warren has actually been funding and advancing research being done at UC Davis on specifically to develop a far more robust and complex system based on all these different factors we know play into high quality grape growing today. So including, you know, vapor index, obviously still temperature, but temperature variation as well. You know, airflow models, light intensity, and all of these different factors are being brought together and gathered through remote sensing technology and weather meters on the ground, but then also in relation to actually studying the berries themselves and seeing how all these factors play into phenological changes in the grape at different points of the season, with the ultimate goal of being able to better track which cultivars work in which areas, and also that we can better understand the effects of climate change as well. And I think it's really significant work. It obviously takes time. One of the things to remember about California is that we have the highest concentration of that kind of technology that Karen mentioned anywhere in the world, highest concentration of sensor equipment in vineyards, alongside kind of openness to that innovation that Hermione mentioned, and the funds to support that, and alongside the producers willing to share that data. And so there's actually a lot of new companies specifically looking at how to better understand regenerative farming, climate change, and grape growing quality that are all being formed here in California intentionally because of the synchronicity of all those factors. And so we're really at a significant moment that as Karen said, we're getting to see into the future right here on the ground in California today.
Which is wonderful, and obviously will have an impact on winemaking all over the world, which is, you know, fantastic. Hugh, coming to you with that question, what's going on most in California that excites you?
Well, I think it's a slow motion thing. I mean, I'm not up with all the new technology, and I do hope that people never forget that the farmer's boot is the best fertilizer, that you've got to get out in the vineyard rather than relying on sensors. That's one aspect of it. But basically, it is the discovery of terroir, because publications about California wine, even only 20 years ago, made no mention of the dirt. They simply didn't. It was all about climate. Climate zones were the whole thing. This was the Davis idea, was that it all depended on whether the Pacific fogs came in or how cool it was, or, and nothing about what the soil was doing under the vines. Well, this is a really radical change, and this is the most positive to me, now that vineyards are being named rather than just brand names. And it's been slowly acknowledged, but everyone knows that there have been certain spots in the Napa Valley which have been well known for good grapes for a long time. But the development of that and the marketing of it, which is terribly important, are recent events. It's the same story with all of the newer wine-growing regions of the world. They start with a sort of a national approach. They say this is Californian, this is Chilean, this is Australian, and then they come down, they narrow it down, and they say this is Northern California, this is Napa, this is Sonoma, or it's Hunter Valley, or it gets a bit closer, and people get more interested. The drinkers get more interested when they're told more specific information. And now we're reaching the point where we're being told that it is Gravelly Meadow or whatever particular spot it is that grew the grapes. And it probably started with Martha's Vineyard, I guess. Nobody's mentioned Joe Heights, but it was Joe Heights who got those wines from Hansel and did something with them. Perhaps the main thing he did with them was to quadruple the price. I mean, Joe made people look at California by saying it's not $2 a bottle, it's 10. And people said, oh, goodness me, we'd better see whether it's worth it. And of course it was. So all these things are happening at the same time. But I would, particularly in times of the drought stress, now, I mean, California is in a horrible place as far as no rain is concerned. Of what there is in the reservoirs, there's nothing. This will be for dry farmers certainly the test of their terroir. The roots have got to get down deep, and it will mean that irrigated farms become impossible to maintain. I mean, very, very big changes afoot there. I'm not sure that I'm answering the question, but that is a real concern for now.
Thank you, Hugh. Well, I mean, obviously we don't have crystal balls. You know, there's a lot of challenges, but what opportunities, what are all of the panelists looking forward to most as something that you're expecting? I mean, maybe to a large extent, Karen and Elaine have answered this question about what's going well at the moment, but what are you projecting forward that is going to be particularly good? I'm going to come to Elaine for that first.
You know, Hermione, could I interject a thought here? We've been talking about a great deal about conditions and tools. And what I think is going to be a new dimension to help reformulate what's happening in California is that we must remember that as far as wine is made by humans, it is a product of the mind, not of the hands. And the mind supposes a goal that is in the winemaker's mind with his vision of what these grapes and what these tools can get him to. And what is to get him to, or her, get her to, has to do with the aspiration to bring the perfection that they find from their conditions and their tools and their grapes, and what is assigned by perception of what wine should do to the human soul. It should modify by its being in the mouth. It should transmit a message to the soul that something is in a condition that changes the soul and makes it better, gives it an experience of something that the soul didn't possess before, but through wine, it can come to possess it somehow. And that, for me, would be a sense of completeness, which we are not complete as humans, but we can somehow experience it through wine. And that state of the soul would be something that we ascend beyond ourselves to something else, which makes us better.
Thank you, Warren. Thank you, Warren. That was very beautiful and eloquent. And as you rightly say, has taken us to a slightly different direction. Elaine, thinking more perhaps spiritually rather than technically, would you like to add anything?
I'm not sure there's reason to. My goodness. Warren, thank you so much for that. I was madly writing down as quickly as possible what you were saying. I have to say, you know, before my work in wine, I was an academic philosopher. And so I always appreciate that side of things being brought back in. Speaking more mundanely to your point about winemakers having a vision, the shift that I see happening that I'm grateful for and excited about is that I believe winemakers of California are evolving their perception of white wine and the quality and interest possible with white wine. We've long proven how stellar we are and talented we are with red wine. And I believe there's a shift that's happening where it's actually possible, not only in our growing conditions, but also in public interest, to actually successfully take white wine seriously and really show how dynamic and delicious and textural and sophisticated, but also how playful it can be. And so I really believe that California has the widest range of expressions of white wine today that it ever has. And there are brands now that focus solely on white wine, which is new. Stony Hill, of course, did it previously, but it hasn't really been done again so singularly until now. And so it's quite exciting that white wine, which other parts of the world have always known can be so successful, finally has enough kind of public interest that wineries here in California can really devote themselves to that. And we're starting to see really exciting examples emerge.
Wonderful. Thank you, Elaine. Hugh, could I come to you with that question?
Well, I think Warren was very eloquently making a bid for what you might call to connect mindful. It's something to drink, it's a swig. Connecting it to your thought processes is something that is another step, and it's not always available. It's not always. This is the responsibility of wine writers or writers of any kind, to get people thinking about what they're drinking. I don't know how successful we've been. I think that it was a great move when UC Davis started to collect wine writing rather than wine technology, for which Warren is largely responsible. Thank you very much, Warren. It's the critical opinions, it's the mindfulness, it's the appreciation of wine, which is not by any means universal, but it will lead to the sort of result that Warren is after, and so am I.
Thank you, Hugh. And Karen?
Yeah, I would, I suppose I have three short points here. One is that for consumers, I'm seeing and looking forward to seeing more of a search for authentic wine experiences. I think that's the culture of wine in America has changed dramatically, thanks in no small part to California. And the idea that there's something, to use Warren's word, soulful about somehow coming and experiencing California wine country, I think is important. From a winemaker's perspective, I think we are in a very new era where intuitive winemaking is more and more appreciated. I've always loved asking winemakers how much they rely on science and how much they rely on intuition. And when you asked that question 30 years ago, it was sort of science 80% and intuition 20%. And only recently have I had a lot of winemakers say it's sort of 50-50 now for them, which I think is a wonderful sign. And then lastly, I'm hoping that wine communications for us, for all of us who are on the screen right now, that wine communications will change. We're in a very, very dynamic period of how wine information is disseminated, by whom, how it's talked about, right down to the language that is used to describe wine. And I'm not sure where all of this is going, except I think we can all feel that there's a lot of energy around the idea of how wine is communicated. And I certainly do feel that we have only begun in that arena to explore how we might make that world more vivid, more personal, more dynamic.
Wonderful, thank you. And I very much hope that we, Académie du Vin Library, can be part of that that voyage actually with everybody here. I missed a couple of contributors. I know we've got Brian St. Pierre in the audience and Randall Graham. Thank you so much for joining us as well. So we'd basically like to ask for questions, but I know that Patricia might like to say something, and some of the other contributors might like to say something. So if I can come to the contributors first, whether it's questions for each other or just something to say. Patricia, over to you.
I'm very happy to look at the screen and see so many people who are friends of Stephen's and who had shared experience with him and of whom he spoke so highly. So that is a very happy experience for me. Warren, I wanted to mention that actually I met you before you met Stephen. I remember well your children gambling on the lawn, and it was 1975, and I had come up from Palos Verdes to look for wines for the bicentennial tasting, which is now known as the Judgment of Paris. And why did I come? Because I pitched to Stephen the idea that for the bicentennial, we really had to find better wines than we could find at retail in Paris. What we could find were old style wines, and I had to look away when we gave them to the Académie du Vin students and friends to taste, because I was beginning to understand that they did not reflect the new reality of California wines. So I looked away, but I couldn't be proud. I didn't feel we were doing a service to California. So I said, Stephen, for the bicentennial, and of course was not very sensitive to the idea of a bicentennial. As he said, the British do not celebrate the independence of America. But he loved ideas. And so when I came back from my visits with you and Maya Camus and Mike Grigich, et cetera, and gave him such a glowing report, he said, there will be a tasting of the best we can find. And he came out in the spring of '76, in April or the end of March, and the tasting was in May. So there we are, and that's why I'm in Napa, because we're supposed to receive rewards for this heroic action. Mine was just my contribution. My contribution was the idea, and Stephen and George they took it around the world, and the repeat tastings that gave it credibility. And there will be a judgment of Napa tomorrow, which may make history by enlarging the scope of these comparative tastings, hopefully without winners and losers, but with an idea of being conscientious, a conscientious search for intrinsic value, and ably describing the value in a way that it can be disseminated, which, as you have all said, is important to the future of wine. So I'm quite happy. I'm here in Calistoga, enjoying the sun, and we'll go back to Paris on Friday.
Thank you, Patricia.
And let me say, Patricia, that you have been my hero ever since that afternoon.
Brian, I mean, Warren, tell me it's not true that you have said that I said when I was tasting your Stag's Leap that it tasted like Beaujolais, and I was not that much of a neophyte, and I really hope you will retract that.
Oh, no, that goes into the Heroes album as well.
That I survived such an insult. Okay. Well,
Ladies and gentlemen, some questions or comments from the floor? Brian, I thought you had seen your hand. You're muted, Brian. You can unmute yourself if you'd like to. No, we can't hear you yet. Bottom left corner.
How about that? Can you
Yes,
hear me?
perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect. Thank you.
Say, Yasu, Warren.
Yasu.
When I'm reading about Napa Valley today, I remember in the summer of 1976, I went to Stag's Leap, and Warren said, "Would you like a tour of the winery?" I said, "I'd love one." He said, "I'll give you the whole tour." I said, "That's great." He took me into a building, stood behind me, put his hands on his shoulders, and turned me 360 degrees. And he said, "Did you enjoy the tour?" And I don't get the feeling that's the same sort of experience anymore, but I'm sure it's still wonderful. Bless you, Warren.
Yeah, thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Oh, I also, one more thing. I've not seen the book, but I've seen some of the pages, and kudos to the designer. It's a lovely looking book, which is always a pleasure.
Thank you, Brian. That's Tim Foster, who's our art director, who's wonderful. And your copy will arrive any minute now. It should be leaving our warehouse in the UK today, I hope. Anybody else? Questions from anyone else before we wrap up? Hugh, I think you're on mute at the moment.
Hermione, just to say what an incredible pleasure it is to see so many friends who obviously, for obvious reasons, haven't seen. This is a reunion, and it's a joyous. I'm thrilled to be in the company of friends again. So much pleasure and so many memories of marvelous wines we've enjoyed together. And let's do it again soon. Let's see each other soon. Let's get cracking again, because the emergency is fading, I sincerely hope, into the past. Thank you all.
I'm sure they would love to see you on the West Coast. Elaine has asked if Gerald wanted to make any comments, and I wondered if Elaine wanted to say anything. I can't actually see Gerald. Aileen, I meant to say Aileen the second time, but Elaine and then Aileen. That was, I hope, deliberate.
I've unmuted myself. I don't know that I very much can contribute very much, because I've been fascinated by all that's been said. It's always a pleasure to hear Warren. I don't know that I've met Elaine, but I thought her presentations were wonderful. And well, in fact, everybody. And I'm much looking forward to seeing the book. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerald. Well, I huge appreciation and thanks for everybody for coming along this morning or today. Please let Kati or I know if you have any questions about the book, if you'd like to speak to anybody who's written in it. We publish on October the 25th, and it's an important publication for us, so we really appreciate your interest and your support. Karen.
Excuse me, Hermione, how can we support the sales of this book? How are you disseminating it? Where will it be for sale? Tell us how we can help.
That is a very good question, and thank you so much for the offer of support. So the book will be available from Amazon, and it will be available from our website, which is by far the best place to come and buy it, because you can see all of our beautiful books in one place and join the mailing list. But it will also be available in some good bookshops. So we have signed up with a new book distribution company, and they're focusing on key accounts for the next couple of months. But I'm hoping it'll be in places like Rizzoli in New York, and the West West Palm West Palm Beach bookshop. Amazon will have it as soon as the stock arrives in their warehouse. So I hope as close to October 25th as possible. Patricia.
Question, please.
Yes.
Wouldn't it be positive if as many people as possible wrote reviews on Amazon, because the reviews do make a difference. They might, the client might buy from the Académie du Vin Library site, but the review would have made a difference, would have influenced them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And certainly, I mean, for everybody who has social media channels, as well as obviously all of the journalists who have, mainstream media outlets, anything you can do, but when you get the copy, please do take a photo and post it and tell people that it's available from us and from Amazon, and then people will go where they prefer to shop. But yes, to Patricia's point, reviews on Amazon will massively help. That would be fantastic.
We do have official photography as well. So if you prefer a professional photograph of the book, we can provide that. And I'm happy to help facilitate any interviews with authors or with Hermione and her team as well.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you all so much for joining us. I think we've probably come to the natural end of the day of the event. Warren, thank you so much for the time and for giving us those beautiful words. And thank you, panel, so much for speaking so beautifully and interestingly on the topic. And I look forward to meeting some of you, I hope, in real life on the West Coast at some point. But if anybody is ever in London, please do let us know you're here. We'd love to take you out for a beautiful lunch or dinner. That would be fantastic. Thank you so much, Kati and Tinker, for arranging everything. Yeah, have a good week, everybody. Have a good Judgment in Napa event as well, Patricia.
And happy early birthday to Stephen Spurrier.
And happy early birthday, yeah.
And congratulations to Académie du Vin Library.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.